Hey, I'm here with Michael Shuman, old friend, young man, but old friend, um, and colleague. And we're here for another, what I'm calling CoVida conversation. COVID, but it's shared life. It's like we're
Hmm.
all in this together, and we know it now more than ever before, whether it's the problem or the solutions. It's really going to be hopefully species wide. Anyway, and so um, the question I'm asking my colleagues is what social or environmental good might be possible now that seemed impossible before? What real and actionable projects or policies or memes or creative expressions? What's the creative spark in this moment that we can blow on? Not like just as like, oh, that was nice, but really cause to come into being. Milton Friedman said, only a crisis actually perceived produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. So how do we cause some of these sparks to be the ideas that are lying around? And over to you, Michael. Who are you and what do you have to say about that?
So, greetings from Maryland, where I am talking right now. It's where I live in sort of suburban Washington, D.C. And a little about myself. I am an attorney, an economist. I'm an author of 10 books and a provocateur around community economic development. And I would say that I am feeling cautiously optimistic about the kinds of new thinking that we're having. I've written two pieces for my website, one last week, which was called "The Glass is 1% Full: 12 Reasons Why we should be kind of appreciative of the crisis we're in." And then today I published another one, which was a bunch of principles for reconstruction. And specifically, I was thinking about how not to replicate the economic development mistakes of the past that left us so vulnerable to this kind of crisis, and instead to think about how we approach economic development from this point forward with resilience and a greater degree of invulnerability at the core of our design. Um, so I'll just mention a couple of the things that I think are somewhat positive. So one is that I think resilience, which was really seen by many people in the economic development field as a luxury, as something that, maybe if you're rich and you're in a big metro area, you can do some resilience planning, but the rest of us can't afford that. Now there's an understanding that all of us have to be doing resilience planning. And but it's more than that. I think it's understanding that resilience comes about from some degree of self-reliance. You're on an island. All of us are really metaphorically on islands now because our supply lines have been greatly cut off. And the ability of our economies to withstand a crisis like this really depends on being able to provide for ourselves a much higher percentage of the goods and services that we rely on in our lives. And I think that is now crystal clear. This is going to be true for future crises. It's going to be true for a lot of the fallout that's coming down the pike with climate disruption. It's true, it's been true for a long time with the ups and downs of financial markets globally and people who put their money into their community as opposed to on global financial markets are going to sleep a lot better at night. And that sort of leads me then to the second piece that I'm cautiously optimistic about, which is that even with the stock market coming back uh, a little bit over the last week, it's still down about a third from its peak in January, February. And it's really remarkable. And what I found is that after the last stock market collapse in 2008, that was really the birth of a lot of movement around local investing. And this is going to happen again. People are going to be looking for new places to put their money that's less of a roller coaster in their own backyard, businesses, projects like municipal stormwater management, solar utilities, and even people getting your kid out of student loan debt or helping someone get out of credit card debt. I mean, all of these things are going to be much more real, and I think we'll have better payoffs at lower risk than where people are placing their money now. And that sea change will ultimately fortify economic development as I understand it, because the more money that we reinvest not in the stock market but around our own community, the more our communities will grow, the more income, wealth, and jobs in our community. So all of this is really quite positive. Um, Another thing that I see as being positive is that changes in the way we do our politics. I am heartened to see that many states are moving toward mail-in ballots, which our friends in Oregon have been doing comfortably for years. And uh, I mean, I would love to see it happen at a national level. I'm dubious whether that can happen. But certainly in a lot of states, we're going to see this happen. And there's a lot of advantages to mail-in ballots, but one of them, in my mind, is that it really increases the rate of participation, and that the absence of participation, and frankly, this is a point that I think is as frustrating to the left as it is to the right. But I think, when you have limited participation, a determined minority can inflict its voting preferences on a more lackadaisical majority. Um, I think that voting by mail will enable a much more reliable degree of mass participation and help to legitimate people with reasonable views to come into politics, and will help to cool down some of the political excess that we've had in recent years that seems to be getting worse and worse. Um, Another thing that I see as a positive is that we're learning how to uh, rethink our lifestyles consistent with a lighter environmental footprint. Um, I've spent, and I've been as guilty as the next person. You know, until this crisis, I spent about a third of all of my work time flying around, which has a horrible carbon footprint. And then 2 days a week, I'd commute from where I live about an hour each way to Georgetown, where I work for an affordable housing company part time. And what, now that I am working at home, I'm seeing a couple of things. First of all, I'm realizing there is a way for me to do virtually at a lower carbon footprint almost everything I was doing before. Um, and the sky has not fallen in on me. I appreciate that the sky has fallen in on many people, many jobs right now, and I don't want to in any way uh, not mourn for that, and that the difficult transitions that people have with that. But the point that I'm making is that when you can see in your own lifestyles ways that you can change the way that you work, that I can telework, and companies can see that they can telework. And I don't necessarily have to have a 9 to 5 workday. Um, so Vicki, you more than anyone else, I think, called out for all of us 25, 30 years ago that we were letting our work week veto all other elements of our life. And I feel like in the last couple of weeks, we're sort of invited to revisit that. And I have seen, in addition to changing my work style, I am spending more time in nature. It's the only place I can go. And I see that nature has kind of come back. It's like nature has decided to reclaim the space that we as humans are not occupying as viciously as we did before. The birds in the morning are louder. The air is cleaner. Now, some of the pollutants in the air are very long term, so it'll be a long time before we see the benefits of that. But it's a step in the right direction. And again, the sky is not completely fallen down. We can do this. Um, so, what have I missed from my list? Um, I think the other thing that I will mention, and this is my partisan side, um, but so there was there's 2 points to make here. The 1918 flu was particularly vicious because it wiped out younger people, and older people had more of a um, perhaps more resistance from earlier flus. Um, this pandemic is exactly the opposite. It is wiping out people of our generation rather than younger people. There are bad things with that, and I mean, honestly, um, when I look at the next election or sets of elections, and I see an electorate that is younger demographically, it's going to look a lot more like 2018's election than 2016's election, when we see the kind of youth quake that happened, only more so. And the other thing, and this is perhaps um, bad humor, but it is something to think about, which is um, it's. I remember when I lived in San Francisco, and uh, there was an earthquake in Japan, and a tidal wave came rushing to San Francisco, and many San Franciscans went to the coast to see the tidal wave. And a comedian, one of my favorite comedians in San Francisco, Will Durst, said, "This is God's way of weeding out the stupid." Um, and in a funny and perverse and really unjust way, um, the the places that have poo-pooed this virus, that have not taken precautions, they are going to pay the biggest price. And maybe, just maybe, this will bring science and empiricism back into our day-to-day lives and decision making, and drive out fake news with real facts.
Wow. And the last statement you made is a bold and risky statement. It's because we really are in a time, our population is getting pruned all the time. I mean, there's a lot more illness and death than we're talking about now. It's just that this virus we have no sense of control, and it has no manners in terms of who it's going after. Um, uh, but there is going to be, it's recognizing death as an aspect of life. And it's also the question of who dies and is it just or unjust. And I looked at a map this morning, I think in the New York Times site, that colored the nation in terms of effective measures to flatten the curve. And my God, the South was completely on the imprudent side.
Right. Yes.
And it was just stunning how clear that was. So anyway, we're not gonna like what I'm interested in. That's a I just wanted to acknowledge that is a difficult conversation to have, but there's something necessary about how many people are we and how do we moderate human, and not just human impact on the environment, but human numbers. There's the vast, the virus that humans are in the natural world. But the thing I want to go back to is this, and I agree with you on everything you're saying about self-reliance, and that there are sort of concentric circles. The more prepared your household is, the more able you participate in your community, the more resilient your community is, the more you're able to like not be a victim, but to be a creative presence in the larger. So basically, it's like concentric circles of resilience. The thing I was curious about was the economics of this, and it's really thinking about money and how money is created. That money is created by the central bank, and currently we're using those tools, which I don't have enough knowledge to really think it through, but it seems very inflationary. I mean, just printing money everybody's money is somehow worthless, but so it's very complex, this infusion of money into our system. But that there are, number one, South Dakota, I think it is, or North Dakota is the only state that has a state bank. It's sort of raising the question of, oh, who gets to print this stuff? Who gets to print money? And that maybe, was it North Dakota has a state bank?
Yeah, North Dakota.
Yeah, North Dakota. So North Dakota has the capacity to print money and harvest the interest for the functioning of the state, as far as I understand. So, and it's different from issuing bonds. It's a different way to put out into the environment capacity for, making a claim on resources. And I'm thinking about, in this complex time where, people will get 1 month of relief, but month two, who knows? Where our hospital is fundraising from the community because they're threatened. They could go away. Our one hospital on this island. So
Right.
that there are, it's not like time dollar systems. It's like just thinking about resource flows in communities, this relocalization, which is not just massage for massage, but paying your hospital bill in something else. Or is it, in our community, I've just written a letter to the editor encouraging people, like, if that $1,200 that you may get is not crucial to your well-being, consider donating it to one of our community organizations. Do you see, not just like a few conscious people with surplus resource investing in local businesses, but are you being able to envision how, alternative forms of currency, and that's not just time dollar thing, how currency is created in local communities that are forced into greater resilience? I just
Yeah.
wanted you to apply
Yeah.
yourself to that.
Yeah. So there is a precedent, which is the last Great Depression in the 1930s, when a bunch of communities in Europe and in the United States printed their own currency. And some of these communities paid municipal workers or partially paid municipal workers in the currency. And these same jurisdictions also allowed partial or complete payment of their local taxes in the currency. And when local currency is commonplace among the largest institutions, particularly the government institutions in a community, I think they can play a very important role in economic development. So they can play a role in, picking up demand, and they can play a role in making sure that people are productively engaged. Um, and yes, as you said, there always is a danger in a either a local currency system or a national currency system, that if you mismanage the way that you introduce the currency, you could wind up with inflation, and create a whole set of new problems. And yeah, I think that the way that we have, the way that we've created new federal debts around these various stimulus packages, could tip the United States from being, I mean, we have, by most people's standards, I forget what the last number was, but it's in the 20 plus trillion dollars of debt, which means that our national debt was equivalent to a year of gross domestic product. So, I mean, to think of it in household terms, you owe as much as your income. Um, when people start owing more than their income, um, that's when we need to start to worry about their solvency, and that I do worry about that with the stimulus we've created. So yeah, so maybe if states could create additional kinds of stimulus, that would be terrific. But listen, I feel like I also get nervous talking too much about money, because I feel like um, lots of people, uh, some on Wall Street and some who hate Wall Street, um, give money an almost magical quality. Uh, and at the end of the day, it's not. There's really nothing that magical about it. And I do think that there is nothing magical about moving our life savings, our pension funds, out of Wall Street and into our communities. So you were kind enough to write a very generous blurb on my book, which comes out in a couple of weeks, called Put Your Money Where Your Life Is, which I appreciate it. And, in that book, I try to teach people how to use two little known tools, a self-directed IRA and a solo 401k, for moving their money out of Wall Street and into the things they really care about. Um, and I feel like if we can get a sizable number of people to just do that, and when we come out of this pandemic crisis, if people could say, okay, what I owe my community is maybe a 10% shift. I'm going to move 10% of my life savings out of Wall Street and into these local businesses around me that I love, that I know need help in coming back. That will be the reconstruction that really matters.
Right. And so so are you talking about a way to marry retirement instruments, instruments of retirement savings, not just like, I like, Georgie's farm, and so I'm going to lend Georgie $5,000 to build a hoop house, and then Georgie pays me back with it, and she pays me her interest in dry beans. which actually is what happened.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not that sort of micro loan situation. It's sort of you're creating an intermediate institution of some sort, or mechanism where you're putting your retirement savings into a mechanism that then puts the money into the community. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and so one of the things that I argue in the book is that long before you put a penny into any other business, there are things around you that you should be doing that also benefit your community. So the first thing is getting out of credit card debt. If you have a penny of credit card debt, you should not put money into anything.
Mm.
Just get yourself out of credit card debt, and then you plug that leak of money that was leaving your community to some outside bank. And you get this massive rate of return, because rather than paying 25% interest on the credit card debt, you're getting a positive rate of return from your money. Another example would be your kid has a student loan debt, and if the kid is not insolvent, the kid's paying 7 or 8%. You buy that loan, pay it off. Kid pays you back at 5%, which is a more reasonable number. 5% in today's stock market terms is a great rate of return. Help the kid, help yourself, help the kid's credit rating. I think, this is the kind of investment that these opportunities are really all around us. Putting money in your house, owning your house, is a really good thing to do. If you have a mortgage, paying it off faster. Once you've done all of those things, and there's other things we could add to that list, start looking at businesses, start your friend Georgie or whoever else. I think, though, what we're gonna find is an emergence of a new generation of community investment funds. So, over the last few years, we've legalized investment crowdfunding, and a small number of Americans have participated in this kind of grassroots investment. But what we're also seeing is that it's a lot of work for someone to evaluate a company and to manage their investments. And so that's why, in the Wall Street world, we like to have an investment manager who creates a portfolio that we trust and manages it. And that's what we need to do at the community level.
Right.
I don't think it'll take us long to get there. In Nova Scotia, they passed a law in 1998 to permit communities to create investment funds for their pensions. And now there are 70 of these funds operating. Most of them are successful and profitable. And by the way, Nova Scotia has 1 million people. So, if you take that to the U.S. scale, we would have tens of thousands of these funds in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm aware that, I'm trying to get like a nugget for people so that we don't go on, and I'm fascinated with what you're saying. And I just think the picture to paint is that we have uploaded our well-being into a system that is constructed, probably like X% by real things, and X% by just figments of imagination. And I think in the Depression era, people were convinced that they needed to own their own stuff. They needed to not be beholden to anybody, and they would rather be frugal and have, know that they own the thing, than to be expansive and actually have everything reclaimed by the bank. And so, I mean, if a sentiment of fiscal conservatism at a personal level, like, I don't want to pay any interest to the bank. The bank is not where money is. Money is in human relationships. How do I create a currency here through, not just through like one-to-one loans, but something you're describing an intermediate capacity that has the possibility of growing in this moment when we've realized that where we've put our nest, where we've put our eggs, the basket we put our eggs in, the eggs are cracking. So, this is very interesting. And maybe in a month's time, I would like people to, on this video, I'm going to be sure to put like a little screen that has your website so people can actually read your stuff, because it's critical current moment thinking. But maybe come back around in a month's time and have a conversation and say, well, how are these, community scale resilience resources coming into being, and where are the opportunities now? So I want to thank you, Michael. I just love listening to you, because when you paint a picture, I actually see it. I actually see it.
And you don't run away, which is good.
No. I'm basically, I used to call myself a peasant. I'm the kind of person like, if I can feel it, see it, touch it, taste it, then it's real. And all this other stuff is not so real. So I'm your relocalization gal of the highest order.
Excellent.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And I hope everybody who's listening to this enjoys. So I'm going to just.
Great. Thank you.